Here is our aim: improving the motivation and engagement of maths resit students in FE colleges by using social media-based platforms. This project was a collaboration of 7 FE colleges and at least 9 teachers, as shown here. I would like to thank all for their invaluable input and dedication on this project. Initially, we were looking at what is social media, what defines it, and so we used here a typical definition. Social media are web-based communication tools that enable people to interact with each other by sharing and consuming information. At the outset, we researched the use of social media in education and its use in maths. Unsurprisingly, there is little evidence of this, and the majority of it is 5 years old or more, which is significant in such a fast-changing environment. Evidence of work in this area with resit students is virtually non-existent. We did, however, find some useful conclusions and guides for future work. Ownership matters. Students' social media is their space. Life balance. We want to motivate them both in and out of the class, but we need to be mindful of the life balance. Cognitive load. Doing challenging maths via a digital device can make it even more challenging. Independent study. Using social media and digital has shown benefits such as self-paced work, less anxiety. In line with overload, are students familiar with the software being used and are the teachers confident to use it? Finally, but possibly most critical of all, do students have a suitable device? A large proportion are working from mobile phones. This needs to be considered in the delivery. With the third lockdown in January 21, the government published findings into the remote digital teaching. One of the findings was essentially saying we should consider avoiding the use of social media because of advertising. As social media consumers, the Action Research Group were aware of this issue ourselves, but this implied social media should not be used. It also highlighted how live lessons are not always best and concentration can be lower online. Earlier, we talked about how devices matter, and this evidence from Sutton Trust and from the government's indices of deprivation data shows the challenge. Our network has areas in the most deprived 10% of the country. As a consequence, digital deprivation is significant. This is a disadvantage for these students, but also highlights how social media, which is specifically designed to work on phones, could be a useful vehicle for delivery, especially when looking at supporting students and motivating them outside of the class or outside of the lesson. At the outset, we surveyed the 243 students across the 7 colleges who were taking part in the research. This research showed just 15% rated the idea of maths being on their social media an 8 out of 10 or higher. It also showed the 3 most common platforms used were Snapchat, Instagram, and Teams. Here's the data from the teacher survey. Few maths teachers use social media or were happy to use social media platforms in teaching, but the majority agreed it could improve engagement. 70% would use social media style features such as video or GIFs. The most popular social media used by staff is quite different to that used by students. The fact that they saw that they didn't use it, but they could perceive that there was potential for it being used, would imply that there's some resistance as to why they're not using it, possibly a training issue. In determining the most suitable platform, we looked at all the survey data. For some colleges, the college policy simply prohibited the use of social media. The student survey showed many had reservations about maths being on their social media platform. Equally, the teacher survey showed a reluctance from many staff to use social media in teaching. Therefore, the conclusion was that social media-based features and attributes could be used, but through the use of a college platform, which for all colleges involved was Microsoft Teams. We therefore did a survey of students' use of Teams. And these are the results. Students were more positive about the use of Teams for maths. Most had used it as part of their studies by now, and this reflected in their answers. 93% had used it in communication with maths tutors, and they were more open to the idea of using it outside of the class. Here is a brief synopsis of how Teams was being used by maths teachers, and it shows across the colleges there was a range of delivery styles which impacted what we could do. This variance in delivery made us consider how we could best find ways to motivate and engage students, which allowed for the varying delivery styles. Our first attempt was interactive videos. Software such as ClickView, which we investigated, allows you to make videos and embed questions. The video stops, question pops up, and students answer it, or so we hoped. But we found not all did when sent to our students outside of the class. Some skipped the questions, and so measuring its success was more challenging. We also found that they took time to make, used more space, and in some ways were potentially repeats of information you can already get from sites such as MathsWatch, Corbett, etc. For these reasons, we felt that this wasn't necessarily the best vehicle. Our next trial was GIFs. GIFs are relatively short videos with no audio. You can see some examples playing here. We all made a variety of these and sent them to our students. The feedback was more positive. Depending on device, these play automatically, they repeat automatically, and so they are hard to ignore. The feedback from students on GIFs was much more positive and indicated that students on the whole found them beneficial. 89% of students looked at the GIFs we sent them on Teams, and many said they were useful, 79%. Some of the key comments were they were easy, clear, quick, good for revision reminders. When asked what they didn't like, 50% said there was nothing they didn't like. Those that did varied, including contradictory answers such as it was too fast, too slow, no audio topics, I already knew the topics, it was too hard, it was too easy. And here are some of the comments we got back from students. These positive comments when asking students what they thought about GIFs, and it was particularly pleasing to hear from some people that they thought they were fun.
This is the first time I've been involved in a CfEM action research project, and it's been a really positive experience. It's been great to work with teachers from other colleges and to try something different in my teaching that I wouldn't have done otherwise. So as part of our project, we were looking at using social media to engage and motivate students, and we did that by developing and sharing GIFs. I used an app called Giphy to create some short GIFs on a kind of a range of topics. I chose some topics that we were still teaching, so that linked to lessons, and some that would be used for revision in the run-up to sort of end-of-year assessments. Most of them I made from scratch using PowerPoint, but I was able to use some that my colleagues had made and also adapt some from Giphy. So that did sort of cut down in the time it took. I'm not particularly techie at all. I've never made a GIF before. I don't think I really knew exactly what a GIF was, but they really aren't that difficult to make once you get used to them. So I sent one GIF out each day over a period of about 3 to 4 weeks, tying in for the first couple of weeks with topics I was teaching, and then some general revision topics. Towards the end, I did follow up with a couple of questions to sort of try and get a bit more interaction from the students. Before we did the action research project, my students, the majority of students, had said they weren't interested in sort of linking social media to helping them learn maths. But after the trial, the majority of them actually said they'd viewed the GIFs at least twice, which meant that they'd chosen to go back and look at them a second time at least, after I first sent them, which I think is a good sign that they thought they were helpful and useful. The vast majority reported that they were quick, they were easy to follow, they were simple and straightforward, helped them to understand and get their head around sort of a method or a topic. Very few had any criticisms really, which was great. Just a few said perhaps they weren't detailed enough, and a few said that some of them were annoying, but maybe being annoying makes them more memorable, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. I shared them briefly with some of my colleagues in my college, and they were all really interested. I'm sort of looking to share them already with some of their students. I think taking it forward, there's definitely more that could be explored using GIFs, particularly around sort of following them up with questions and just making it more sort of active for the learner. I'm certainly going to carry on using them next year, and I'll start at the beginning of the academic year and sort of tie them into my scheme of work and the topics as we go along.
In conclusion, GIFs provide a quick way of demonstrating best practice, quick examples and reminders revision. They can be shared on social media platform and on virtually all devices. They take up minimal memory, making sharing easier. They utilize staff existing practice and skills and expand on these, developing what they already do and maximizing its impact. Based on the feedback and data from students and staff, we feel there is room for further investigation into the application of GIFs as a medium. So what was the impact? Comparing those students in action research classes with those that were not, we found there was a 3% increase in attendance and an 8% increase in grade 4 passes. This is based on data from Weston College, subject to AO approval. So what's the future? Well, here are just a few examples of things that we perceive that GIFs could be used for. And finally, here's a quick GIF on how to make a GIF. And as you can see, once it's finished, it rotates back to the beginning again. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Thanks for watching, everybody. And are there any questions?